I caught my wife cheating with her ex at a club, so I exposed her in public, took back everything she stole, and finally walked away free forever. For the past 6 months, Ben had been navigating a fog. Not a literal one, but an emotional miasma that had settled over his marriage to Kathy, thick and suffocating. Their home, once a place resonant with easy laughter and the comfortable friction of two lives intertwined, now felt vast and cold, echoing with silence. He remembered Kathy's laugh, a bright, infectious sound that could slice through his worst moods. He remembered the casual way she used to loop her arm through his, a simple gesture that anchored him. Those memories felt like artifacts from another lifetime, unearthed and coated in dust. Hebrew Kathy wasn't just distant, she was a different entity inhabiting the familiar shell of his wife. Conversations, when they happened, were stripped bare, functional transactions about utilities, groceries, the dry husk of shared logistics. The intimacy, the easy flow of shared thoughts, and physical closeness that had been the bedrock of their relationship had evaporated. It wasn't a gradual decline. It felt like a switch had been flipped. Ben's attempts to breach the silence, to find the path back to them, were met with a wall of indifference or sharp-clipped rejections that stung more than outright anger. He replayed the last time he'd reached out, instinctively placing his hand over hers as they sat on the couch, a movie droning ignored on the screen. She'd flinched, pulling her hand away as if scorched. "I'm tired, Ben," she'd mumbled, eyes fixed forward, refusing to meet his gaze. The excuse was flimsy, transparent. Later that night, lying awake, the ceiling fan clicking a monotonous rhythm above him, Ben realized with a jolt that he couldn't pinpoint the last time she'd initiated any touch, any physical sign of affection. Images of their early years flickered behind his eyelids, hikes ending with shared thermoses of coffee, late-night talks whispered in the dark, the electric thrill of building a future together. She had been his confidant, his partner, the person who saw him. Now it felt like she looked straight through him. Her focus directed elsewhere towards something he couldn't comprehend. An invisible, impenetrable barrier stood between them, erected brick by silent brick. Shebrer, the not-knowing, gnawed at him. What had triggered this seismic shift? Was it something he'd done? Some unconscious slight, or worse, something he'd failed to do? He dissected their interactions, searching for the fracture point, the moment the slow leak began. But Kathy refused to engage. Every tentative, "What's wrong?" was deflected with a brittle, "Everything's fine," or a dismissive wave of her hand. Her tone held an edge, a sharpness that kept him at bay, her eyes avoiding his as if acknowledging his presence was too much effort. It wasn't just the lack of affection. It was the chilling absence of care. The small gestures, the shared jokes, the intuitive understanding, all gone. He felt like a ghost haunting his own life, unseen and unheard by the person who mattered most. He tried. God, he tried. Romantic dinners met with polite disinterest, thoughtful gifts accepted with a brief, vacant smile, suggestions of counseling dismissed with variations of too busy, too stressed. Not now. After months trapped in this emotional limbo, Ben felt himself fraying. The constant tension, the unanswered questions, the palpable distance. And it was a corrosive force eating away at him. He couldn't sustain the charade any longer. Tonight, he decided, pushing his uneaten dinner around his plate. Tonight, he would force the issue. No more tiptoeing. No more swallowing his hurt. He needed answers. Even if the truth shattered the fragile remnants of their life together, he found her curled on the living room sofa, bathed in the cool blue light of her phone screen, thumbs scrolling rhythmically. Her expression was placid, detached, utterly absorbed in whatever digital world held her captive. A wave of weariness washed over Ben. The familiar urge to retreat, to let it go for another day. But the resolve held firm. He took a breath, stepped into her line of sight. "Kathy," Ben began, his voice lower than he intended, tight with a fatigue that went bone deep. "We need to talk." She didn't look up immediately. A few more seconds of scrolling passed before she lowered the phone slightly, her gaze still distant. "Can it wait, Ben? I'm kind of in the middle of something." "No," he said, the word sharper than he meant. He moved closer, planting himself between her and the television. "No, it can't. I can't keep doing this, Kath. Living like roommates, wondering what the hell happened to us, to you. I need to understand what's going on." Kathy sighed, a long, put-upon exhalation. and finally set her phone down, though her body language screamed resistance, arms crossed tightly over her chest, chin tilted defensively. "What is it now, Ben?" He took another breath, forcing calm into his voice. "It's about us, about the last 6 months. You've completely shut me out emotionally, physically. It's like we're strangers sharing a mortgage. I deserve to know why." Her expression didn't soften. If anything, it hardened, a dismissive frown settling on her lips. "I don't know what you're talking about," she said, the denial flat. "Absolute, you're imagining things, overthinking." A raw surge of frustration finally broke through his carefully constructed composure. "Overthinking?" The word came out incredulous, tinged with bitterness. "Kathy, we don't touch anymore. You recoil if I even brush against you. You barely speak to me unless it's about bills. You act like I'm an inconvenience. I'm your husband, for Christ's sake. Don't I deserve some kind of explanation?" Kathy's eyes narrowed, a glacial calm descending over her features that was somehow more chilling than anger. "Ben, my body is my choice," she stated, her voice perfectly even, devoid of emotion. "Frankly, you should be asking permission before you even think about touching me. I live my life the way I choose. My boundaries need to be respected." Brr. The words landed like stones, heavy and brutal. Ben stared at her, momentarily speech lungs in a rush. "What?" he finally managed, the sound barely a whisper. "Kathy, where is this coming from? This isn't you, not the you I married. This started 6 months ago. It's like you've been replaced. Do you even hear yourself right now?" None of this makes any sense. A flicker of something, anger, contempt, flashed in Kathy's eyes before the icy mask slipped back into place. "I used to be naive," she snapped, the words clipped and sharp, easily influenced. "I let you let societal expectations dictate how I should feel, how I should act. But I've educated myself. I see things clearly now. A woman has inherent rights that supersede a man's expectations. You need to accept my choices, meet my demands." Brihi. Ben felt a dizzying sense of vertigo, as if the floor had dropped away beneath him. The woman standing before him spitting these alien phrases felt like a stranger wearing his wife's face. "Kathy," he said, his voice trembling slightly with disbelief. "What are you talking about demands? I've never disrespected you. I've always supported your choices, given you space, compromised. What happened? Did you join some online group? Read some radical feminist blog?" Her eyes blazed. "There it is," she shot back, voice rising. "Minimize my feelings, accuse me of being irrational, influenced by radical ideas. And let's be honest, Ben, this isn't about boundaries for you. You're just pissed off because I stopped wanting to sleep with you. That's all men like you ever really care about, isn't it? Your base desires." Briefly, Ben pressed the heels of his hands into his eyes, a wave of exhaustion and despair washing over him. The sheer absurdity, the deliberate twisting of reality, it was too much. Was this really happening? Was there anything left here worth fighting for? He lowered his hands slowly, meeting her defiant gaze. His expression was etched with pain, but also a dawning, grim resignation. "Fine, Kathy," he said. The words slow, measured, heavy with finality. "If that's the framework you want to operate under, let's apply it consistently. My wallet is my choice. My money is my choice. So, here's the deal. Effective immediately, you get a full-time job, a real one, and you start paying exactly half of every single household expense. Mortgage, utilities, food, insurance, 50%. How's that for respecting choices and boundaries?" Kathy's face contorted, flushing a deep mottled red. "That's financial abuse," she shrieked, her voice cracking with rage. "You're trying to control me, manipulate me. I knew you'd resort to threats and emotional blackmail." "Manipulation," Ben echoed, throwing his hands up, the last vestiges of hope draining away. "Kathy, I don't even recognize you anymore. When did you become this person? When did you lose yourself?" She sprang to her feet, trembling visibly, her fists clenched at her sides. "This," she spat, jabbing a finger towards him. "This is exactly why I've changed. Because of men like you, thinking you can gaslight women, dismiss their feelings, control them with money." Ben stood too, his own anger finally surging, hot and righteous. "Gaslight you? I've spent months bending over backward, trying to figure out what was wrong, trying to reconnect, trying to salvage our marriage. And what did I get? Silence, rejection, accusations. You treated me like the enemy, like I was the source of all your problems." The air crackled between them, thick with unspoken resentment and years of shared history now curdling into poison. They stood locked in a stalemate, breathing hard, the angry words hanging heavy in the silence. Beneath the anger, Ben felt a profound, crushing sadness settle in his chest. This wasn't a partnership anymore. It wasn't even a disagreement. It was war. He turned away first, unable to look at the stranger his wife had become. The word divorce, once unthinkable, now echoed in his mind. Not as a failure, but as a potential escape hatch, a way out of the fog. The fluorescent lights of the lawyer's waiting room felt harsh, clinical. Ben sat stiffly, staring at the framed print on the wall, a generic landscape that did nothing to soothe the knot tightening in his gut. White and Associates, it sounded solid, reliable. He needed solid right now. He wasn't impulsive, never had been, but the thought of enduring another day, another week, another year of Kathy's coldness, her bizarre pronouncements, the aching void where their connection used to be, it was intolerable. Ebro Trevor White was exactly what Ben expected. Mid-50s, sharp suit, firm handshake, eyes that assessed everything with calm professionalism. For the next hour, Ben unburdened himself. He laid out the timeline, the gradual withdrawal escalating over 6 months, the stonewalling, the physical rejection, the strange, almost cult-like rhetoric about boundaries and demands, the final explosive argument. He spoke evenly, trying to keep the emotion tamped down, presenting the facts as clearly as he could. Trevor listened patiently, his pen scratching occasional notes on a legal pad. He didn't interrupt, didn't offer platitudes. When Ben finally fell silent, exhausted from the telling, Trevor leaned back, fingers steepled. "It's a challenging situation, Ben," he said, his voice measured but not unheard of. Dramatic shifts in personality, particularly coupled with withdrawal and rigid ideologies, can sometimes indicate external factors. He paused, adjusting his glasses. She might be deeply involved in a new belief system, perhaps influenced by online communities, or it could be something more personal. He. Ben's stomach clenched. More personal? You mean like someone else? The thought had flickered at the edges of his mind, but he pushed it away. Trevor gave a slight non-committal shrug. It's a possibility. Infidelity often manifests in sudden secrecy, personality changes, and emotional distancing, but he held up a hand. Let's not leap to conclusions. Right now, we focus on your options. We can begin drafting the divorce petition immediately, or you could take some time, observe, gather more information. Understanding the full picture might give you clarity, perhaps even leverage should this proceed contentiously. Ben nodded slowly, the lawyer's pragmatic approach cutting through his emotional turmoil. Okay, let's hold off on the paperwork just for a bit. I need to see. That evening, Ben sat at the kitchen table, laptop open, spreadsheet glowing. He meticulously listed every shared expense: mortgage, property tax, insurance, utilities, internet, groceries, car payments. He double-checked the figures, the sum total stark and significant. He divided it precisely by 2. His own salary easily covered his half. He typed Kathy's required contribution onto a separate document, printed it, and folded it neatly. From the back of the hall closet, he retrieved a simple, unadorned wooden box, maybe meant for keepsakes or recipes. He placed it squarely in the center of the kitchen counter, the folded paper beside it, a silent declaration. Kathy came home later than usual, dropping her keys with a clatter. Ben was waiting, seated at the table, outwardly calm. He gestured towards the counter. "Kathy," he said, his voice neutral, "that paper details our monthly household expenses. I've covered my 50%. The box is for your share." She froze mid-step, her eyes narrowing, instantly suspicious. "What is this supposed to be, some kind of power play?" "No," Ben replied evenly. "It's respecting your stated desire for independence and defined boundaries. If we're equals, as you say, then we share the responsibilities equally. This is your half." Her face flushed, anger tightening her features. "This is coercion, Ben. You're punishing me because I won't conform to your expectations." "No, Kathy," he countered, keeping his voice steady, firm. "I'm acknowledging the new rules you've established. Independence isn't just about making demands. It comes with responsibility. I've carried the financial weight of this household almost entirely for years. If the dynamic changes, the financial arrangement has to change with it." Her eyes flashed. "You know, my part-time job doesn't pay anything near what you make. This is completely unfair." Then perhaps it's time you found a job that does, Ben responded, his tone unwavering. He nodded towards the box. The first bills are due at the end of the month. Your contribution needs to be in there by then. Kathy stared at him speechless for a moment, before whirling around and storming towards the bedroom, muttering about manipulation and emotional abuse under her breath. Ben didn't react. He just sat there, a strange numbness settling over him. The anger was gone, replaced by a weary sense of inevitability. The following weeks unfolded predictably. Kathy outwardly simmered, but made no move to find better employment. She continued her part-time shifts, spent hours glued to her phone, and complained bitterly to anyone who would listen, presumably her friends via text, about Ben's unreasonable financial demands. The wooden box remained untouched, a stark symbol of her defiance. Ben watched her, not with anger anymore, but with a kind of detached curiosity. Her pride, always a strong trait, had hardened into stubbornness, a refusal to accept any responsibility for the state of their marriage or their finances. Any attempt Ben made to discuss practical matters was met with deflections, accusations of control, or stony silence. As the end of the month loomed, the box stayed empty. Ben wasn't surprised, just confirmed. He'd held on to a sliver of hope she might make an effort, show some commitment. Instead, she doubled down on her victim narrative. The day the mortgage payment was due, Ben sat at the kitchen table again, the statement and the empty box before him. He braced himself. This conversation was unavoidable. Another inevitable clash. "Kathy," he called out, his voice calm but carrying. "Could you come here a second?" She appeared in the doorway moments later, arms crossed, a familiar scowl firmly in place. "What now?" He gestured towards the box. "The mortgage and other bills are due today, Kathy. The box is empty. We need to pay these or we face penalties." Her scowl deepened. "I'm aware," she snapped. "You don't need to remind me like I'm a child." "Then what's the plan?" Ben asked, keeping his tone level. "We agreed. You handle your half. I've done mine." "Oh, brrrr," that was the spark. Her composure shattered. Unbelievable. Her voice rose sharp and accusing. "You're my husband, Ben. A real man provides. He doesn't nickel and dime his wife. This is pathetic." A cold anger different from his earlier frustration rose in Ben. "Pathetic," he shot back, his voice dangerously quiet. "You demand independence. Lecture me about boundaries and choice. Treat me like dirt for months, and now you want to talk about traditional roles. You want to play by your rules? Fine, but those rules apply to everything. Pay your share." Brr, her face was crimson. She looked like she wanted to hit him. Instead, she spun around and stalked back to the bedroom, slamming the door hard enough to rattle the frame. Ben heard muffled sounds, drawers opening, frustrated sighs, objects being moved. Nearly 20 minutes passed. She returned, her face tight with resentment. In her hand was a crumpled collection of bills and a small scattering of coins. She walked stiffly to the counter and dumped the money into the wooden box with a clatter that echoed in the tense silence. "There," she said, her voice dripping with bitterness. "Happy now. That's literally every cent I have." Ben glanced at the meager sum in the box, then back at her impassive face. "Thank you," he said quietly. But Kathy wasn't done. She leaned against the counter, arms crossed again, eyes blazing with venom. "I can't believe I married someone so petty, so obsessed with money. You're just like all the rest, controlling, selfish, needing to hold the power." Ben didn't engage. He'd learned arguing was pointless, fuel on her fire. He simply watched her, a detached observer studying a predictable reaction. Her words barely registered anymore. The path forward was becoming clearer, illuminated by her actions, her refusal to meet him halfway on anything. What would she do now? With no money left, would she finally look for real work? Or would the manipulation tactics escalate? He didn't know, but one thing was certain. The foundation of their marriage had crumbled to dust. A week later, Ben found himself unable to sleep. The silence in the house felt charged, brittle. Kathy had been quieter since the money incident. Withdrawn, but still radiating a low hum of resentment. The charade was exhausting. He padded barefoot into the living room where Kathy had fallen asleep on the couch again, her phone lying loosely in her hand, screen dark. A sudden, undeniable impulse seized him. He knew her passcode. They'd always been open about that, back when openness was their default state. His fingers trembled slightly as he picked up the phone. It felt like crossing a definitive line, a betrayal of the man he thought he was. But the gnawing suspicion, fueled by her bizarre behavior and Trevor's subtle suggestion, was too strong to ignore. He unlocked the screen, his heart pounding against his ribs as he opened her messaging apps. He scanned recent conversations, mostly mundane chats with family or generic messages. Then he saw it, a group chat labeled GNO. Girls' night out, he presumed. His blood ran cold. He tapped it open, the screen filled with messages that made him physically nauseous. It wasn't just Kathy. Several of her friends were in on it. They weren't just venting about partners. They were actively, enthusiastically discussing affairs, sharing intimate details, encouraging each other's indiscretions, laughing about close calls and deception. His eyes scanned frantically, searching for Kathy's contributions. They were there, explicit, detailed, bragging. Then came the photos. Selfies of Kathy with men Ben didn't recognize, smiling, laughing, looking happier and more alive than he'd seen her in months. Pictures clearly taken in hotel rooms, bars, even someone else's home. One photo stopped his breath. It was Kathy lying on a bed looking seductively at the camera. Scrawled across her bare stomach in what looked like lipstick was a man's name, Mark. Above it, also in lipstick, was Ben's name, crossed out with the word loser written underneath in crude capital letters. Bile rose in his throat. He scrolled further, faster now, a sickening dread pooling in his stomach. There were more photos, videos, even short clips of Kathy dancing intimately with other men, kissing them, disappearing into rooms with them. They shared these trophies within the group, celebrating their conquests, mocking their unsuspecting partners. The girls' nights weren't just nights out, they were calculated opportunities for infidelity. He found links to profiles on a discreet dating app he'd never heard of, confirming his worst fears. Every time she'd claimed stress, tiredness, or needing space with her friends, she'd been actively betraying him. His hands shook violently. The cold detachment he'd cultivated shattered, replaced by a white-hot rage mixed with profound, soul-crushing hurt. This wasn't just cheating. This was malicious, calculated cruelty. The contempt, the mockery, as it was devastating, his mind raced. Trevor's words echoed. Gather more information, leverage. With trembling fingers, moving purely on instinct, Ben started downloading everything. Every incriminating message, every photo, every video. He saved them to a hidden folder on his own phone, then transferred them to a secure cloud drive, triple-checking they were safely stored. He carefully navigated back, deleted his activity from her phone's recent usage logs, and placed the device back exactly where he found it, nestled beside her sleeping form. He backed away slowly, retreating to the dark kitchen, leaning heavily against the counter, struggling to breathe. The woman sleeping peacefully on the couch wasn't just distant or difficult. She was a calculating liar, living a secret life built on deceit and contempt for him. The last 6 months weren't a mystery anymore. They were a lie. Hebrew, the decision was no longer a question. It was a certainty. He texted Trevor immediately, the message blunt. Get the papers ready now. The response came quickly. Understood. They'll be ready by tomorrow afternoon. Tomorrow couldn't come soon enough. The confrontation, the divorce, it wasn't just an escape anymore. It felt like reclaiming his stolen reality. The next morning, the air in the kitchen was thick with unspoken tension, at least on Ben's side. Kathy, however, seemed oblivious, humming lightly as she made coffee, acting almost cheerful. It was jarring, surreal, knowing what he now knew. Morning, honey, she chirped, turning with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Morning, Ben replied, his voice flat, devoid of inflection. Brew, she poured herself a mug, sat opposite him. The small talk felt like shards of glass in his ears. Then her demeanor shifted, becoming faux casual, almost playful. You know, Ben, she began, stirring her coffee with exaggerated slowness. This is a bit awkward, but I was wondering if you could possibly spot me like $150 just till payday next week. I swear I'll pay you right back. Ben stared at her, the audacity. After everything, after the lipstick message, after the lies, he felt a cold calm settle over him, the rage momentarily banked by sheer disbelief. He remembered her desperate performance the night before. The sudden attempt at warmth, the invitation back to their bed he'd rebuffed. It all clicked. She thought her little charm offensive had worked, softening him up for a loan. He leaned back, meeting her expectant gaze. $150, he repeated quietly. Actually, Kathy, I have something better for you. Her eyes lit up slightly. A hopeful little smile played on her lips. Better? Like $200? She asked, trying for a light-hearted tone. Ben reached down beside his chair, picked up the crisp manila envelope Trevor had couriered over that morning, and slid it across the table towards her. "This," he said simply. The smile vanished from Kathy's face. Confusion flickered in her eyes as she picked up the envelope. Her fingers fumbled slightly with the flap. She pulled out the documents, her eyes scanning the heading, "Petition for Dissolution of Marriage." The color drained from her face. She looked up at him, eyes wide with shock, then back down at the papers, as if unable to comprehend what she was seeing.
"Ben,"
she stammered, her voice suddenly small, trembling.
What is this? It's exactly what it looks like, Kathy,"
Ben said, his voice steady, glacial. "Divorce papers. I've thought long and hard. This isn't working. It hasn't been working for a long time. It's over." Panic flooded her eyes. "Over, Ben. No, this is too fast. We can fix this. We just need to talk, really talk. I can change, Ben. I promise I can change." He shook his head slowly, his resolve absolute, forged in the fires of last night's discovery. "It's too late for that, Kathy. Way too late. I spent months trying to understand, trying to bridge the gap you created. You pushed me away, mocked me, lied to me, and now the only reason you were suddenly interested in fixing things is because you need money." He didn't mention the phone, the chat, the photos, not yet. That was his ace, his leverage, his eventual revenge. Ibrahim, tears welled in her eyes. She reached across the table, her hand hovering near his arm. "Ben, please," she begged, her voice choked with desperation. "You don't understand everything I've been going through. I made mistakes. I know I did, but don't do this. Don't throw away years." Ben met her gaze, his own eyes hard, unforgiving. "I understand enough, Kathy. I understand the lies, the manipulation, the contempt. This isn't healthy. Not for me. Maybe not even for you. I deserve honesty, respect. I deserve better." Her face crumpled. She stared down at the papers, clutched in her shaking hands. "I don't want this," she whispered, tears finally spilling over. "Neither do I," Ben replied firmly. "I don't want this," he gestured vaguely between them, encompassing the lies and the wreckage. "Any more." He stood up, taking his coffee mug to the sink. "Read the papers. Get a lawyer. My decision is final." He walked out of the kitchen, leaving her alone with the stark reality of the divorce papers and the life she had systematically dismantled. The divorce itself was swift and brutal, largely because Ben held all the cards, even if Kathy didn't know the full extent of his hand. Trevor White expertly guided the proceedings, armed with Ben's detailed financial records proving his sole significant contribution, and Kathy's documented refusal to contribute or seek meaningful employment. They presented a strong case. Kathy, represented by a less experienced lawyer she could barely afford, floundered. Her demands for alimony and a larger share of assets were systematically dismantled by Trevor, who painted a picture of a partner who had emotionally and financially checked out of the marriage long ago. Ben didn't need to reveal the infidelity evidence in court. The financial imbalance and Kathy's documented behavior were enough. Cornered, facing mounting legal fees and the prospect of walking away with very little, Kathy reluctantly agreed to a settlement heavily skewed in Ben's favor. He kept the house, the majority of their savings, his retirement accounts intact. She walked away with her car, personal belongings, and a modest time-limited alimony payment that wouldn't sustain her lifestyle for long. Months slid by. Ben adjusted to the quiet solitude of the house, which slowly began to feel like his own space again, cleansed of the toxic residue of the marriage. He focused on work, reconnected with old friends, started exercising again. He heard through the grapevine that Kathy had moved in with some guy named Mark, the name scrawled on her stomach in that sickening photo. A bitter taste filled his mouth, but it faded quickly. It didn't matter anymore. He was free, but the downloaded file still sat heavy on his secure drive, a digital time bomb ticking away. The anger hadn't disappeared, it had merely cooled, solidified into a hard knot of resentment. The public humiliation, the mockery, loser scrawled above his name, echoed in his mind during quiet moments. He deserved closure. No, he deserved revenge. He started planning meticulously. He researched VPNs, anonymous posting platforms, ways to scrub metadata from the photos and videos. He chose Reddit, specifically a notorious subreddit known for exposing cheaters, a place where stories like his were devoured and amplified. He spent hours crafting the post, carefully anonymizing himself, but providing just enough verifiable detail without naming names initially to make the story credible and devastating. He selected the most damning photos and video clips. The loser picture, Kathy kissing Mark. Snippets of the group chat messages encouraging deceit. Photos of the other wives with their own lovers gleaned from the same chat. One evening, fortified by a glass of whiskey and a cold sense of purpose, he executed his plan. Using a multi-hop VPN routed through servers in obscure countries, he created a throwaway Reddit account and uploaded the post complete with the carefully curated evidence. He titled it, "Found out my wife and her friends were running a cheating ring. Here's the proof they shared," laughing about it. He hit submit and logged off, heart pounding, not with fear, but with grim satisfaction. The next morning the post had exploded. Thousands of upvotes, hundreds of comments expressing outrage, sympathy, and morbid curiosity. It was trending on the subreddit, then started spilling over into other parts of the internet. News aggregators picked it up. The comments section became a wildfire. People trying to identify the women, sharing similar stories, and crucially, other men recognizing their own wives in the partially obscured photos or familiar details of the shared stories. Within 48 hours, Ben knew from frantic messages passed through mutual acquaintances that Kathy's life and the lives of her friends in the chat had imploded. Husbands were confronting wives, demanding answers, filing for divorce. The digital shrapnel had hit its targets. Ben felt a dark, satisfying vindication. He was the villain now, perhaps, but they had fired the first shot, laughed while doing it, and written him off as a loser. He hadn't started the war, but he had finished it decisively. He was pouring himself another whiskey a few nights later, savoring the quiet hum of his house when the furious pounding started at his front door. Not a knock, but a violent barrage, shaking the door in its frame. He looked through the peephole. Kathy stood on his porch, her face a mask of apoplectic rage. Flanking her were three other women, faces he vaguely recognized from Kathy's social media, faces contorted with fury. They looked like a pack of wolves ready to tear him apart. He opened the door just a crack, leaving the security chain engaged. "What do you want, Kathy?" he asked calmly. "You bastard!" Kathy shrieked, shoving uselessly against the chain door. "You absolute bastard! You ruined my life! You ruined our lives!" The other women echoed her fury, shouting threats, accusations. "You posted that video, those pictures," another woman screamed, tears of rage streaming down her face. "My husband left me because of you. We'll sue you for everything you have. We'll destroy you." Ben kept his voice level, almost bored. "Sue me for what? Posting a video?" He allowed a small, cold smile. "First, you'd have to prove I posted it. That post was anonymous, uploaded through layers of security. Could have been anyone who got hold of that chat log. Maybe one of your boyfriends got jealous. Maybe one of your friends decided to burn it all down. You guys," he gestured vaguely at the furious quartet, "pissed off a lot of people apparently. Like what, 10 different guys? Any one of them could have done it. Good luck proving it was me in court." Their fury seemed to momentarily falter, replaced by sputtering confusion. They hadn't thought that far ahead. "You're lying," Kathy insisted, but the conviction was weaker. "Am I?" Ben countered smoothly. He pulled out his phone. "Right now, you four are trespassing on my property, screaming threats, and causing a disturbance. I wonder what the police would think." He started dialing. "Yeah, emergency. I need officers at my address immediately. There are several individuals trespassing, threatening me, and refusing to leave." A panic flashed across the women's faces. Suing was one thing, facing charges was another. "You wouldn't," one of them gasped. "Try me," Ben said, his voice like ice. He kept the phone to his ear, relaying his address clearly. The women exchanged frantic looks. The fight drained out of them, replaced by fear. They backed away from the door as the distant wail of sirens grew closer. Kathy shot him one last look filled with pure, undiluted hatred before turning and hurrying away with her posse, disappearing into the night, just as the first police car rounded the corner, its lights flashing blue and red against the walls of Ben's quiet house. He watched them go, the whiskey glass steady in his hand, a chilling emptiness settling where the rage had been. The revenge was complete, but the silence that followed felt heavier than before.